I am with you at present,
said Gandalf.
but soon I shall not be. I am not coming to the Shire. You must settle its affairs yourselves. That is what you have been trained for. Do you not yet understand? My time is over. It is no longer my task to set things to rights, nor to help folk to do so. And as for you, my dear friends, you will need no help. You are grown up now, grown indeed very high among the great you are, and I have no longer any fear at all for any of you.
These words are spoken by Gandalf to the hobbits, following the defeat of the Dark Lord Sauron. The wizard telling them that his time in Middle-earth is over. He cannot set things right or help others to do so any longer, trusting in the strength of those who have earned the right to achieve this on their own, as the hobbits later demonstrate. But what was Gandalf's purpose in Middle-earth? From arriving to aid in the growing threat of Sauron earlier in the Third Age, to eventually guiding Frodo and the Company of the Ring in an effort to lead the One Ring to the land of Mordor where it could be unmade. Gandalf's task and purpose evolved through his time in Middle-earth. In this video, I want to explore this evolving purpose in Middle-earth, and why Gandalf's return as Gandalf the White, following his fall in battle against the Balrog, Durin's Bane, led to him becoming an important figure beyond the fall of a Dark Lord. Gandalf aided in fulfilling the destiny of the race of men, elevating the original purpose of the Astari, becoming more than just an instrument against Sauron, but a steward of Middle-earth, ready to pass on that responsibility. What was the original purpose of the Astari, those wizards that had sailed across the Great Sea? The tale of years in the appendices tells us that when maybe 1,000 years had passed in the Third Age, the first shadow had fallen on Greenwood the Great, this being the first sign of Sauron's return following his defeat at the end of the Second Age. The wizards, Maiar cloaked in the bodies of men, then appeared in Middle-earth. They were messengers sent by the powers of the West, the Valar, with the purpose of contesting the growing power of Sauron, tasked with moving the enemies of Sauron to goodwill and valiant deeds. They were not sent to Middle-earth to remove Sauron by force on their own, if he should arise. They were to aid those inhabiting Middle-earth, inspiring hope through their wisdom, appearing in real and not feigned bodies of men, sage figures of noble authority. A great plan, which sadly had most members of the Order fail in their task, in part due to the weakness of the flesh. We must remember that the Astari did not just appear as old men. Their bodies were real. They were subject to the fears and pains and weariness of earth, able to hunger and thirst and be slain, all to aid in the effort to treat on equal terms with those they wished to aid, to avoid daunting them through their majestic presence, a failure of the Valar in ages past. Saruman, the original head of the Order, was a prime example of the possibility of a fall for these figures. He sought to overthrow Sauron, but by any means necessary, replacing him in the process, establishing himself as a power at the expense of those he was sent to help, for their own good, because knowledge, rule and order means power and authority in Saruman's mind. Radagast failed in the sense that he cared for the inhabitants of Middle-earth, but not the right inhabitants. He cared more for the flora and fauna of Middle-earth. A failure in the sense that he had forsaken the children of Iluvatar in their efforts against Sauron, but one we can understand. As a Maya of Yavanna, it would be natural for Radagast to grow attached to those often overlooked. His failure had nothing to do with personal power or gain. The Blue Wizards, who do not appear in The Lord of the Rings, may not have directly failed, at least according to late writings of Tolkien. Their fate was unknown, even to the author himself. It is possible they were founders or beginners of secret cults and magic societies, outlasting the fall of Sauron. Or they stirred up rebellion, having an influence on the history of both the Second and Third Ages, stopping Sauron's forces from outnumbering the West. This late piece of writing by Tolkien changes the dates these wizards appeared, having the Blue Wizards arrive in the Second Age and not the Third. So these wizards failed or helped in a way, depending on which text you read. They were at least absent from the north and west of Middle-earth during the War of the Ring itself. Gandalf's fate is known to us, and he sacrificed himself to save his companions and the quest to lead the One Ring to Mount Doom, when the Company of the Ring found itself confronted by the Balrog within Moria. His sacrifice was noble, selfless, and was accepted by Eru Ilúvatar, who was the one to send him back to Middle-earth, enhanced in wisdom, power, and authority. The wisdom and power within that had been dimmed before was now able to shine greater upon his return. And after he returns as Gandalf the White, he says that he has returned for a brief time until his task is done. He becomes instrumental in Sauron's downfall, rallying Sauron's enemies, inspiring hope, possibly his greatest strength and weapon against Sauron, and standing as a captain of the West, the White Rider set against darkness. The original plan of the Astari succeeded through Gandalf. Let's remember that Eru did not change the plan of the wizards set out by the Valar. He took up the plan when Gandalf fell, enlarging it at the moment of its failure.
Unless the king should come again, said Gandalf. Well, my lord Steward, it is your task to keep some kingdom still against that event, which few now look to see. In that task you shall have all the aid that you are pleased to ask for. But I will say this, the rule of no realm is mine, neither of Gondor nor any other, great or small. But all worthy things that are in peril as the world now stands, those are my care. And for my part, I shall not wholly fail of my task, though Gondor should perish. If anything passes through this night that can still grow fair or bear fruit and flower again in days to come. For I also am a steward. Did you not know? And with that, he turned and strode from the hall with Pippin running at his side.
Yet Gandalf the White did not function within Middle-earth as some wanderer in the wild. The passage I quoted from Minas Tirith shows that Gandalf has responsibility, great responsibility, directly involved in the care of Middle-earth and those within it, handling this responsibility with less brute force than has possibly been attempted in the past by his superiors. For many years he has gathered no wealth nor followers, but friends and all folk in times of need. He isn't in Middle-earth to defeat Sauron at any cost, unlike the disgraced former head of the Order, Saruman. Gandalf would not want to defeat Sauron and leave Middle-earth in a worse state than before. If that was desired, the Valar could have, in theory, arrived themselves, or sent another host. Perhaps Tulkas could have knocked on the door of Barad-dûr himself. There is a larger plan at work here. I recommend my video of the Valar and Middle-earth for more detail on their motives in the Third Age. Sauron's defeat has to allow the betterment of Middle-earth. The days of continent-wide catastrophe are over. It has to be earned, with lessons learned from all that had to happen to have Middle-earth finally free of tyranny.
This is your realm, and the heart of the greater realm that shall be. The third age of the world is ended, and the new age has begun. And it is your task to order its beginning and to preserve what may be preserved. For though much has been saved, much must now pass away. And the power of the three rings also is ended, and all the lands that you see, and those that lie around about them, shall be dwellings of men. For the time comes of the dominion of men, and the elder kindred shall fade or depart.
Gandalf does not just leave after Sauron's defeat. He remains for a while. His task is not yet over, and he plays a role in Aragorn's future. Aragorn has been waiting his whole adult life to fulfill his destiny, to reunite Arnor and Gondor, to become a great leader of men, a destiny he has been marching towards for years, the king who has returned after 1,000 years. Yet it is Gandalf who aids in Aragorn's understanding of his great duty as the king returned, in a world free from dark lords, but not free of great responsibility. The wizard leads Aragorn in the night to the southern feet of Mindolluin. From there they go to a high hallow, on the mountain where kings had wont to go in years past. Through steep ways and lofty peaks, they stand and look behind the great city of Minas Tirith. Gandalf speaks of a new age beginning, with Aragorn not merely being a king of his realm, but a leader in the dominion of men. The power of the three rings held by Gandalf, Elrond, and Galadriel failed when the One Ring was unmade, as Elrond and Galadriel suspected they would, and the race of elves will fade or depart from the shores of Middle-earth. Men remain, and men will rule. Middle-earth is theirs to care for, and Aragorn will lead this effort. The Third Age was Gandalf's age, as he says to Aragorn. Gandalf was the enemy of Sauron, and Sauron is gone. The burden of care must lie upon Aragorn and the race of men as a whole. They have earned the right to be given that responsibility. At this moment, Aragorn realizes his mortality, lamenting that despite his extended and blessed life, he is one man, and his time on earth will come to an end. What does Gandalf do to open Aragorn's eyes to his place in the grand scheme of things? He points Aragorn towards a sapling tree, with a crown of white petals shining like sunlit snow. A sapling of the line of Nimloth the Fair, with that being a seedling of Garathilion, and that being a fruit of Telperion, the eldest of trees. Aragorn's eyes are guided to it by Gandalf, a symbol of heritage, of Aragorn's place in a noble line of kings and men from ages past. Kings came before, and kings will come after. It is a symbol of hope and destiny itself.
Who shall say how it comes here in the appointed hour? But this is an ancient hallow, and ere the kings failed or the tree withered in the court, a fruit must have been set here, for it is said that, though the fruit of the tree comes seldom to ripeness, yet the life within may then lie sleeping through many long years, and one can foretell the time in which it will awake. Remember this, for if ever a fruit ripens, it should be planted, lest the line die out of the world. Here it has lain hidden on the mountain, even as the race of Elendil lay hidden in the wastes of the north. Yet the line of Nimloth is older far than your line, King Elessar.
Aragorn buries the withered tree and plants the new tree. It grows gladly. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. Aragorn no longer laments the time he has, but declares that the sign has been given. Despite him once saying that he knew what it meant as one age ended and another began, it is the wizard Gandalf who removes any doubt within Aragorn's mind. He helps him understand, truly, the weight of history, the destiny of mankind as this fourth age approaches, and how he will play his part from this day on. The king has returned as Aragorn the King Elessar, wedding the daughter of Elrond, Arwen Undomiel. Gandalf's purpose in Middle-earth was certainly to aid in Sauron's defeat, but after his return as Gandalf the White, he plays an important role in leading Middle-earth into a life after Sauron. Much like Faramir, as steward, led the ceremony in crowning Aragorn as king, effectively offering to pass the authority of Gondor over to the king who has returned. Gandalf offers his stewardship of Middle-earth, handing over the burden of the care of Middle-earth, the enlargement of the plan of the Valar. The plan was something more than removing an evil threat. Thousands of years of hardship saw Sauron's removal, a reign of terror that had its roots in the first stage of the world, with the tyrant Morgoth. The race of elves has forged and created, leaving the world to the followers, men. Gandalf's ceremonial role as steward has him pass the torch. Sailing over the sea does not come immediately following the fall of Barad-dûr, but with the rise of mankind. Thanks for watching this brief overview of the important role of Gandalf in Middle-earth. I think his importance in what happens after the world recovers and settles following Sauron's defeat is just not talked about enough, and this was my opportunity to highlight that he was more than just the enemy of Sauron. If you enjoyed this content, visit my channel and try out some other videos, and I hope you will subscribe if you haven't already.